Well, let's do it.
Okay, great.
Cool.
Oh, you're already recording. Okay, excellent.
Let me just slide right into
sure.
it.
So my name is Eric Smith. I'm the Executive Director of the Freeport Historical Society. And here at the Harrington House on Main Street in Freeport, we're in our overview of general Freeport history. Many people know Freeport as the home of LL Bean, really significant outdoor retailer. But Freeport really started as a collection of villages along the Harrisicot River, which is a tidal estuary. They came for the fishing resources, the shellfish resources, and certainly the timber resources that they were using to cut down trees, build homes, clear land for farming. And then that timber was also used for shipbuilding. There were quite a number of shipbuilding operations along the shore of the Harrisicot. During the British colonial period, this part of Maine was also known for its very tall white pines. And by law, any white pine tree that was over 100 feet tall was the property of the crown. They were marked by masked agents who went out looking for these trees. And when those trees were felled, many of them came through Freeport, through an area that was known as Mast Landing, because those 100-foot tall or more pine trees were going to be used for masts for ships in the British Navy. So they would be floated out of the Harrisicot River on down to Portland and then shipped across the ocean to England to be built into those masts for those ships. So that's one of the things that we're known for. Shipbuilding really went out as a trade when wooden hulled ships were no longer the most desirable, and things moved into steel hulled ships. And that manufacturing was happening elsewhere, not here in Freeport. But just about that time, as shipbuilding was going out, the railroad was coming in. And when the railroad came into Freeport, that really sparked more of the industrial rise of factories in downtown Freeport. And the industry that Freeport ended up specializing in was shoemaking. So shoemaking really had a hold on Freeport as the major industry for most of the 20th century. And it was also that shoemaking industry that gave rise to LL Bean, who came here. He was an entrepreneur. He started with the Maine hunting shoe, now commonly known as the bean boot, as his first product, and that really grew into an entire outdoor industry. But what LL Bean specialized in was also marketing Maine and the Maine outdoor experience. And that was an experience that more and more people were coming to discover, particularly with the rise of the automobile. US Route 1, which was being built up the coast of Maine, really encouraged all kinds of folks to travel in a new way, particularly up from cities. So folks were coming on the train, but they were now also coming by car. And that experience, Freeport certainly had a big part in. And it wasn't just LL Bean, but all of the many things that rose up around Route 1 that were attractions for tourists. So the industries for Freeport really went from shipbuilding to shoemaking to tourism. And that's really still where we are today, as we receive about 3 million visitors that come through our downtown village each year, particularly over the summer months.
Wow. So that's the short history.
That's the short history.
And can you just, I know we just discussed before just about some of the visuals or kind of how to pull the story.
Yeah, so Freeport Corner, this is the hub. I mentioned that there were a number of smaller villages along the Harrisicot River and that estuary and that deepwater harbor. Where we are in what is now called downtown Freeport was known as Freeport Corner, because that's really where the roads intersected that came up from those coastal villages and in from the more inland farms to this main street that we now call US Route 1, but was the King's Highway or the Post Road in its early days. And so this was a place of dry goods stores, of carriage shops, of blacksmiths. This was the heart of that trading within those coastal and inland communities. So we have some exhibits related to the sorts of things that would have been sold in some of those early stores. And then we also look at that shoemaking industry with some of those early tools that would have been used from this cobbler's bench. And shoemaking in Freeport really spanned hand-sewn shoes, like these moccasins here that were really stretched out over custom lasts. Some of these lasts were, carved down to really match the proportions of individual people's feet, long before you had standardized sizing. But that went into really that more industrial mass production of shoes as well, with some really quite heavy equipment that was used for die cutting leather, significant mass production of putting shoes together, sewing soles, and that trade is still happening at LL Bean in a more modern way. But with our LL Bean exhibit, you can see how that leather is still die cut into pieces. Those are still sewn into the components of the flat upper before it becomes three-dimensional and eventually gets attached to the rubber bottom. And that still happens just down the road from here.
Great.
Yeah, so that, and this is the, our sort of early tourism images of, you go from what were called rusticators at the time, those early folks that were coming up to do camping in places like what is now Acadia National Park, quite a ways up the coast from us, but they were coming to lots of parts of Maine, both to the coast and to the lakes. And in addition to folks that were coming to have a very rustic camping experience, you also had people that were coming for the Grand Hotel experience. And we had one of those here in Freeport. It was very short-lived, but the Casco Castle, which was a wooden Victorian era hotel, but was built very much to be, looking like a seaside castle looking out over the coast. And that was served by the electric trolley line that brought you from, you come up by the train, then get on the trolley, and it would take you right to the drawbridge that would take you to Casco Castle. And so there have been lots of different elements of tourism attracting a lot of different folks looking for either very rural, rustic settings or very grand seaside settings. And then you have the folks that are looking for those sort of oddball roadside attractions, and Freeport has had its share of those, from lookouts, towers that were built so that you could climb up and look out to Mount Washington in New Hampshire. We've had folks that have sort of styled themselves as hermits, that you can go in and view their curiosities in their house. And then, of course, we have the desert of Maine, which is not a desert in a classic sense, but it is really sand that has emerged from the last glacial period and really overtaken a part of the forest. But it is its own geological phenomenon, and that's still something that you can go and visit, and has been an attraction along that coastal route up through Maine for quite a number of years.
Can I just ask you about maybe just the idea, the rustic idea, and going to camp?
Sure.
What that's all about, and why people would want to go rustic versus maybe more creature comforts?
Sure. So, there are a lot of reasons why folks are coming to Maine, particularly in the summer months. Maine has long been a place where people were escaping the heat of the city in the summer, and that's really any city in the Northeast, whether it's Boston, New York, Philadelphia. Those have long been folks that have come up to seaside homes that they have built that are their summer homes. Many of the islands here in Casco Bay have long been summer colonies. But especially in the earliest 20th century, those large hotels offered folks that didn't own a summer home an opportunity to come up and experience that same ability to see Maine, to be on the coast, to experience that cool ocean air rather than being in the city where they might live the rest of the year. For folks that are coming up to camp or hunt or fish, and hunting and fishing really was the earliest way that people were coming to experience the Maine woods recreationally. Camping was really just something you did in order to go hunt or fish in those earlier days. But it's that idea again of escaping what may have been a very urban lifestyle for those folks and coming back and connecting with nature in a way that Maine has long been the most rural of the New England states. It still has vast areas that are entirely woodland with no population. So it's long been seen as the eastern wilderness. And that opportunity to come in one of those ways, either to go into the woods, into the lakes, or just experience the seacoast. It's been an attraction for lots of people for a long time.
Wow, okay. Great. So that explains the rusticness, is that right? It doesn't matter. We don't need to go to some luxury place. We just want to get out of the city and just be with nature.
And be with nature.
Be undistracted from...
In most cases, the idea also was that you were simplifying your life. You were disconnecting. Even if you're going to a big hotel on the coast, you were still escaping that city life. But for some people, it's going well into the woods and totally disconnecting from anything civilized.
Right. So that's kind of the ethos and the spirit behind that rustic movement, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, and the rusticator movement in the early 20th century really was this idea of reconnecting with both nature and an earlier time, a more simple lifestyle. And there have been various movements, and including folks here in Maine, in terms of the mid-20th century back to the land movement, of really leaving cities and coming and reconnecting with an agricultural lifestyle where there's a much more direct relationship with the earth, the soil that's growing, the food that you're eating, the animals that you're raising. And there have been those cycles repeatedly, and Maine and Freeport have been a part of that time and time again.
Wow, okay. That makes so much sense. I went all the way up to Jackman, over to Greenville, Millinocket, and Fort Kent. I kept on seeing all these farms with old tractors, and it looked like a museum. Like, this isn't just happenstance. There's something happening here. It feels like art more than just someone left the tractor out.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that's tied into kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah, so, and Wolf's Neck Farm here in Freeport, which was started in the 1950s by a couple that came up from Philadelphia, again, were drawn here by spending summers in Maine, but really started this organic farm from the idea that they wanted to do something to be reconnected with the land. They wanted to conserve that property and that lifestyle that had been farmed by earlier families for generations. They wanted to preserve the open space, but they also, it was an organic farm in the very early days of the organic farming movement, with an understanding that we need to pay attention to the whole cycle, and it starts with the soil, and then it goes to the crops, and then it goes to the animals that are eating those crops, and then returning to the soil. And that farm is still operating really as an educational institution that really focuses on how we can have a much more sustainable food system and sustainable relationship with farming.
Wow. Great.
Have you been out to Wolf's Neck Farm?
No.
That would be a great place to go.